All right, everyone. So I want to tell you one of the reasons why I can't stand a lot of people, and I'm just trying to be as charitable as possible. I don't want to say, oh, I hate all people or anything like that, but I want to tell you why I just don't like talking to a lot of people, especially when it comes to specifically when it comes to things pertaining to religion and ideology and principles, because a lot of people just don't really have principles when it comes to ideology and religion. A lot of people just, how should I say this? A lot of people refuse to sift. They refuse to sift between evil and good. And when it comes to their political football team, they will just take in all things and accept all things and embrace all things because these things are from their political football team. They don't say, hey, this is wrong. This part here is okay, but this is wrong. A lot of people, and I want to be charitable, but I really just want to say most people are this way. And I've seen this so many times. I've seen this so many times in my life that I feel very, very comfortable saying this. I don't feel any sort of qualms saying this sort of thing. People just don't sift. And it really just comes down to one's political football team. What determines someone's position on a certain thing depends on their political football team. And we have seen this so many times. So, for example, there was a guy, his name was Wernher von Braun. His first name starts with a W, so people will say Werner, but in the German language, the W is actually a V, it's a V, so I'm just going to say Wernher von Braun. Wernher von Braun was this scientist slash engineer. He was a rocket engineer. He was really, really into rockets. And he ran a giant slave labor camp. A giant slave labor camp. And after the war, he was given a position in NASA because the Americans wanted his expertise and his knowledge on rockets to help America get to the moon. And when it came out that this guy was a war criminal who committed horrendous atrocities, NASA defended Wernher von Braun. People who worked in NASA defended and tried to cover up for Wernher von Braun. And they said, oh, I worked with Wernher von Braun. I worked with him in NASA. He was a great worker. He was very intelligent, very punctual. He did his work. He hard worker, amazing employee. I loved working with him. But then you read about what Wernher von Braun did. And I was reading this book on the Third Reich today. It's on the rise and the fall of the Third Reich. It's a book written by Michael Berle. Very informative and educational read. And there's this small section in the book. I got about 12 or 13 pages left of the book. I really want to finish it because I want to carry on to read about a different subject. After reading over 800 pages on the Third Reich, you want to read about something else. But anyway, there is this small section on Wernher von Braun and what he did. And you see, for years, I knew that Wernher von Braun ran a slave labor camp. I knew that Wernher von Braun ran a slave labor camp, but I never really looked into the details as to how horrendous it was. And Wernher von Braun ran a slave labor camp. He had thousands of people at his disposal, and they were all working endlessly for hours every single day to help build his big rocket. You see, the Germans were getting bombed to oblivion. The Americans and the British, they were bombing Germany. They were bombing the hell out of Germany. I mean, just bombing the hell out of Germany. Tons of Germans were killed. They bombed Hamburg. They bombed all these different big industrial areas of Germany, and they just killed tens of thousands of people in any given bombing. They bombed the hell out of Hamburg. I think they killed like 45,000 people. I mean, it was really, really horrendous. And so the Germans, they wanted to bomb the hell out of England. They wanted just to bomb the crap out of England. And the Germans just said, hey, let's try to build the biggest bomb in the world. And so they went to Wernher von Braun and they said, you're a rocket expert. We want a big ass rocket. So Wernher von Braun said, okay, I'm going to build the biggest rocket in the world. And he did. He built the biggest rocket in the world at that time. But he needed a lot of slaves to endlessly labor for the rocket. And he had this huge slave labor camp, and people were working for 12 hours endlessly every single day. And once you showed a little bit of exhaustion, they beat the hell out of you. They beat the hell out of you. I mean, we talk about slavery and all that. There was literal slavery going on, and this was in the 20th century. horrendous slavery happening in Europe. And once it was obvious that you were not able to work, they just killed you. And literally thousands of people were murdered by Wernher von Braun in his slave labor camp. It was just absolutely diabolical. All to just build this piece of shit rocket that wasn't even effective at the end of the day. They built this giant rocket. They launched it into England. I think they hit London. And it did cause damage, yes. I think some people were killed. I'm not entirely sure. But all I know is that at the end of it all, the rocket was pretty much meaningless for Germany's war effort. And Germany lost the war horrendously. And thousands of people were killed in this slave labor camp. After the war, Wernher von Braun, what happens to him? He gets a nice, comfortable position in NASA, gets a nice salary, and he became famous. In fact, they have an entire museum dedicated to Wernher von Braun in the state of Alabama. Yeah, a whole museum dedicated to this mass murderer. I mean, here we are in America. We have an entire industry dedicated to true crime. Books on Ted Bundy, books on Jeffrey Dahmer, books on whatever psychopath serial killer that murdered 12 women or something like that. Edmund Kemper. Wernher von Braun is praised by NASA. And he didn't kill 12 people. He didn't kill 13, not even 20. He killed thousands of people. Backed up by NASA, and the employees who worked at NASA said he was a great guy because he was a hard worker. But he was a mass murderer. He was a hard worker. And this is what I hate about people. Oh, I despise this about people. When it comes to their political football team, they will defend the devil himself. They don't give a damn. So if your political football team is NASA and somebody confronts you about Wernher von Braun, guess what you're going to be doing? You're going to be sucking rockets all day. Oh yeah, you're going to be sucking rockets all day long. That rocket fluid is going to be pouring on your face, and you're going to be completely fine with it because NASA is your political football team. That's right. NASA is your political football team. If your political football team is the Roman Catholic Church, I can show you documentaries about Catholic priest pedophiles until you are blue at the face and you're exhausted from watching all these documentaries. You're still going to defend the Catholic Church. I can show you stories about Catholic priests molesting dozens of children, one Catholic priest molesting dozens upon dozens of children. And you'll still say, well, it's the institution is still holy. I can show you that the Vatican covered up for all these crimes. I can show you how they were popes who covered up for these crimes. I can show you how they were cardinals who covered up for these crimes. I can show you how they were freaking monks in monasteries covering up for these crimes. You would still defend the institution because that is your political football team. A number of years ago, I did an entire video on David Atwood. David Atwood was a child rapist and murderer, and he was sentenced to death in the state of Arizona. But because he converted to Eastern Orthodoxy years before his execution, there were a whole bunch of Greek Orthodox people and even some Russian Orthodox people who came along and defended David Atwood and said the man was innocent. Regardless of all of the evidence that was very, very damning, damning for David Atwood, that didn't matter. They were not Catholics, they were Greek Orthodox and Orthodox Christians who were literally defending a child rapist and murderer. Now, I spent hours studying the case of David Atwood. I spent hours reading about the case, looking at all of the evidence, and I came to the conclusion, yes, this man is freaking guilty. And that's why the government, the appellate court, always rejected his appeals, because it was very clear that this guy was guilty. He raped and murdered a little girl, and before that, he sodomized a little boy. And so the state of Arizona said, just kill this bastard. And they killed him. And do you know who defended him? Greek Orthodox Christians. They were literally Christians in Greece, Eastern Orthodox Christians in Greece, who were saying that this man is a martyr. Someone who is a child rapist and murderer is a martyr, according to all these figureheads in the Greek Orthodox Church. It was just completely sickening. I mean, just absolutely sickening. And I did a video about it showing all the evidence proving that David Atwood was 100% guilty and deserved to die. He deserved to be capitally punished. And there were all these Greek Christians defending him, saying that he's a saint, he's a martyr. Now, we talk about St. Paul being killed by the Roman government. Yes, martyr. We talk about St. Peter being crucified upside down. Yes, martyr. We talk about Catholic priests who were executed by the Third Reich, or we can talk about Eastern Orthodox monks and priests who were murdered by the Soviet Union. And we would all agree, yes, those are martyrs, 100%. But a child rapist and murderer is now considered a martyr by a lot of Greek Orthodox Christians. It is horrendously evil. It is diabolical, and that's it. But because some people's political football team, a lot of people's political football team, is the Eastern Orthodox Church or the Greek Orthodox Church, they will defend this guy. And I've seen this so many times in my life. I've seen this in evangelical circles, secular circles, Catholic, Eastern Orthodox circles. People's principles are determined by their political football team. I saw this video of this guy. His name is Jonathan Pageau, and he's this popular Eastern Orthodox figure. And he did a video talking to this Orthodox priest, and they're talking about Anglo-Saxon Christianity and how there was this syncretism between Anglo-Saxon or Germanic paganism and Christianity in the Middle Ages, etc., etc. And this Eastern Orthodox priest is talking about elves and how, well, God was called the Lord of the Elves or something crazy like that.
Another fun thing from that same period of Anglo-Saxon Christianity, and I just have to mention this because I don't know if Richard's going to mention this in your Beowulf class you're doing with him, but this was something I came across as I was doing translation work on Beowulf. So there's a phrase that shows up in it, which is in Old English, it's Alf Walda, right? And a lot of editors actually edit this to make it Allwalda, to make it a single word, Allwalda. Now, that single word means all ruler. So it's like Pantocrator, right? And this is referring to God. It's pretty clearly referring to God. But if you look at the actual manuscript, it's two separate words, Alf and Walda. So Walda is ruler. Alf means elves.
Oh, yeah.
So it refers to God as the ruler of elves. Which, adjust the translation a little bit, you get Lord of Spirits, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So that's interesting. So that's clearly a Germanic pagan reference, elves, right? Elves are just kind of spirits in Germanic paganism.
Yeah.
But again, it's an 8th century Christian writing this.
Yeah.
Alfwalda. So, okay, a couple examples from Norse Christianity, because I'm comfortable with the Germanic stuff. So in the 13th century, there's a church built in Norway called the Helestad Stave Church. The church doesn't exist anymore, but its doorposts still do. And they're in a museum now, but they were on a couple of different churches. And if you look at the doorposts, they are carved wood. It's beautiful stuff. It's really, really astonishing. And it is the legend of Sigurd and Fafnir from the Volsunga saga, which again is Germanic paganism. You've got, Sigurd, who is this sort of semi-divine figure. You've got Regin, who is definitely a divine figure. You've got Fafnir, definitely a divine figure. Fafnir, of course, is a dragon. In the legend, Sigurd goes down and kills Fafnir because Regin wants him to, so they can get the enchanted gold. And then they decide they're going to eat him, because when you eat a dragon, it gives you magical powers. And he actually tastes some of the juices from the heart, and it gives him the ability to understand the language of birds, as it always does.
As it always does.
But this was on the front of a church.
Yeah.
I had someone tell me one time when I said, "Can you explain this to me?" And they said, "Oh, well, that was probably to lure in pagans." So they would see this and they would come in and then and I'm like, okay, well, number one, let's imagine you're a pagan, Norse pagan, and you see this, and then you go in and it's clear that this building is dedicated to worshiping some other god. Like, is that really going to work on you? And number two, there are no pagans in 13th century Norway.
Right, exactly. They're gone.
For hundreds of years.
For several centuries by
hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And another example, of course, from that time and place, well, not that place, but close to that place, Iceland, you get the Prose Edda, which is one of the major sources of Norse pagan mythology.
Yeah.
This is written by Snorri Sturluson, who is a Christian. Again, he's never met a pagan in his life because his great grandparents all got baptized. So we don't have any sources of Norse paganism that aren't written by Christians.
Yeah. And you see, I mean, and you can, if you look at the closer to the Mediterranean, you see the exact same thing happening. The fact that we have Boethius's text, which is a Christian text written with so much pagan subtext and all of these allusions to these allegorical figures. The fact that you'll find in the Middle Ages people still invoking the Muses, these are just things that were part of Christianity.
Yeah.
And to try to parse it one way or the other is just the wrong way to go. And to say that Christianity is just basically infiltrated or whatever. No, this was a conscious thing. When you get to Dante, you can see that when Dante wrote his poem, it didn't shock anyone. It's not like everybody was like, oh no, look at him. He's like meeting all these. It's like he's mixing Christianity and paganism. It was just like, oh wow, this is a great, nice synthesis of what we pretty much think and we've always thought, we've always believed for the last, 800 years or whatever.
As we're going to talk about in the class, there's this element of being unattainable is actually a key feature of the courtly love tradition. So it's actually like part of why it works. And what Dante is going to do is take this courtly love tradition, which is a weird and almost non-Christian part of the medieval tradition. Yeah. It's like it's very problematic, if you would use that word.
It was actually declared heretical at some point.
Oh yeah, especially when you get into the more like the religion of love kind of thing, the stuff where basically you're worshiping Eros as a god and whatnot. But Dante's going to take that tradition and integrate it into the greatest Christian epic. He also does this with the Greco-Roman epic tradition, particularly Virgil's Aeneid. We already mentioned that the Aeneid is one of Dante's main touchstones. You could almost say it's one of his main justifications for why he can tell a story in this way, because Virgil already did it. Yeah. And of course, the Aeneid, like the Odyssey, has a descent into the underworld, and Dante will use elements of that descent, Aeneas's descent into the underworld. He'll use elements of that in the comedy to kind of tie all those things together. And then he'll just make other references to Greco-Roman mythology. If you want to get a sense of how people in the Middle Ages freely made use of and references to Greco-Roman mythology in a way that freaks out, like, I don't know, homeschool parents now. You can, the comedy is really the best example that we have going. We'll talk more.
It's also such a counterexample to the way that people imagine what Christianity has always been.
That's right.
This idea that Christianity was this closed-minded thing, that they got rid of all the old stories, that they were just they really, Dante is the best example of universal history that you can find, in the sense that he really tells the story. He had the story of his own people, and going all the way back to the Greeks, in a manner that is completely conjoined with his Christian faith. So it's pretty astounding.
Yes, and to the point that I'll just scandalize people a little bit ahead of time. Like he'll especially in the comedy, or in the Inferno, especially in the Inferno, which is where you'll find most of these references, because in hell you meet people from Greek and Roman like mythology and myth. Like you meet people from the Iliad and the Odyssey and Seven Against Thebes. Like you meet those people in hell, right? So they're in hell. Why? Because they blasphemed God. But if you go back and look at the story of this guy who blasphemed God, he cursed Jove. He cursed Jupiter, right? And so it's yeah.
I mean, it's just sickening. It's pagan syncretism. And Jonathan Pageau said, well, that was Christianity. Christianity was, to a great extent, a syncretism between Christianity and pagan traditions and pagan beliefs and all these things. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, has anyone ever objected to what this guy is saying? I can't find anyone who has objected to what this guy is saying. It's absolutely sickening. Why? Because that is the Eastern Orthodox. I don't want to say the church, because Pageau is not a priest, but for a lot of people, the Eastern Orthodox worldview, or the Eastern Orthodox subculture, whatever you want to call it, is their political football team. And so they won't say anything wrong about that. They won't object to that, is what I'm saying. Now, if they see the Pope with Pachamama, they'll say, well, that's a problem. And it is a problem. Eastern Orthodox Christians will bash the Pope, but they won't talk against Eastern Orthodox Christians who also do syncretism. And then you see the Pope with Pachamama, and then you see Roman Catholics defending that bullshit. Because that's their political football team. So everyone's morality, everyone's principles is determined by their political football team. And it's sickening. And this is why and almost everyone is this way. Almost everyone, almost every human being that you meet is exactly like this. And that's why it's pointless, really, to have, I don't want to say it's pointless, but it becomes a drag. It becomes exhausting to talk to a lot of people. Because I've noticed this in almost every human being that I've met. If their political football team is Israel, I could show them a video of an Israeli soldier shooting a Palestinian woman in the head, and they'll still defend it. They'll defend it. I found a video of an Israeli soldier literally executing a Palestinian man.
יהודי? איך קוראים לך יהודי? איך קוראים לך? דוד. דוד? בן אברהם מטומטם. בן אברהם, יופי. בבקשה. תיגע בזה אני ארוג אותך, אתה מבין אותי? ארוג אותי. ידיים למעלה עכשיו. הנה, ידיים למעלה. בדיוק. מה אתה רוצה? אני רוצה שאתה תסתום את הפה ולא לזוז. סתמתי פה, בסדר. הנה, בבקשה, וחזרתי אחורה. יהודי.
His hands are up in the air. He's not armed. He doesn't have a weapon in his hand. He's not attacking the soldier with a knife. His hands are in the air, and this Israeli soldier just executes him in broad daylight. And there's video of it. It's not a situation of he said, she said, your word against his. It's nothing like that. It's literally on video. You can watch it. It's on the Wikipedia article. Look up the David Ben Avraham story on Wikipedia. You'll see Wikipedia shows the video from the security camera. You see this Israeli soldier just point blank execute this man in broad daylight. The soldier gets investigated. He gets put on trial. And the government of Israel said, oh, he's not guilty. It's fine. You can just commit murder. Oh, yeah. I was reading a story today about this American soldier who executed a whole bunch of civilians in Iraq, and he's fine. Haditha massacre. Yep, 24 Iraqi civilians slaughtered by this American soldier, and it's fine. Meanwhile, you have Mr. What's his name? Officer Chauvin. Oh, he gets dozens of years in prison for this George Floyd stuff. But this soldier who massacred Iraqis, no, he's free. He's okay. There's no justice. There's just bias. There's no justice. And those people that this soldier murdered, they don't matter. Why? Because they're Iraqis. They're not Americans. They're Iraqis. So who cares? Why the hell were you in Iraq in the first place? Oh, to bring civilization. So your civilization does what? Murders civilians and then lets the murderer go out? It's just sick, guys. But again, if your political football team is America, you'll defend it. This is the problem with people. I have seldomly ever met a human being who sifts between what is right and what is wrong within his subculture, within his religion, within his political circle, within his religious institution. I have very rarely met a human being who actually sifts. Rarely. I don't really meet them. I've met some people who are that way, but they're so rare. They're so horrifyingly rare. What matters is people's political football team. What matters is not morality or justice or truth. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.